My son sat there grinning like he'd just won the lottery while the lawyer read my ex-wife's will. He looked at me with pure pity, the kind you reserve for a stray dog you're about to kick into the rain. "You're getting zero, Dad," he whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not a single dime. Go back to your rental." He was right about the rental. He was right that on paper I was just the broke ex-husband. But he was wrong about who was actually in charge. Because when the lawyer read the next sentence, my son's smile vanished faster than his credit score. "My name is Thomas Blackwood. I'm 68 years old, and this is the story of how I taught my ungrateful son that the man who builds the bridge is the only one who knows how to blow it up. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, like this video and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from." The rain at the cemetery was cold, but not as cold as the look my son Brandon gave me when I tried to approach the casket. He stepped in front of me. "The front row is for family, Thomas." He hadn't called me Dad in 5 years. Not since he decided a retired engineer living in a small apartment wasn't good enough for his image as a rising marketing executive. "You can stand back there by the gate," he said. "Try not to embarrass us. Tiffany's live streaming this for her followers." I looked at my daughter-in-law. She was posing at my ex-wife's open grave, checking her angles, perfecting her waterproof mascara. I didn't argue. I walked to the back and stood under an oak tree, watching them bury the woman I'd loved for 40 years. Catherine and I had divorced 10 years earlier, but not because we'd stopped loving each other. It was strategy, protecting her real estate empire from a lawsuit. We stayed apart on paper. But every Sunday she came to my small apartment for coffee. Every major decision she ran by me first. Brandon never knew that. He only saw a mother worth millions and a father driving a 10-year-old truck. As the crowd dispersed, Tiffany shoved a cream envelope into my chest. It was an eviction notice, 72 hours to vacate the apartment Catherine owned under a shell company. "We're just ripping off the Band-Aid," Tiffany said. "That apartment's prime location. We can flip it for $500,000. Brandon put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Mom's gone. Her charity died with her. Don't bother coming to the will reading tomorrow. It'll just embarrass you." Then they climbed into his leased Porsche and splashed mud on my shoes. I stood alone at Catherine's headstone, pulled out my cracked old phone, and called my attorney. "Mr. Prescott." They made their move. A cold chuckle answered. Classic Brandon. "Are we green for tomorrow?" "We're green," I said. "Initiate phase 1. I sat in a diner for 3 hours, not worrying about where I'd sleep, but running numbers. 28 million. Catherine's estate. 2.4 million. Brandon's gambling debt across 3 casinos. 450,000. Tiffany's credit card debt from a forged second mortgage. They thought they were predators. They were termites, chewing on a foundation about to collapse on top of them. The next morning I walked into Prescott and Associates wearing my oldest, most frayed suit. Exactly the desperate old man they expected. Brandon and Tiffany were already seated, scotch in hand at 10 a.m., treating it like a party. "You're like a raccoon digging through the trash," Brandon said when I walked in. I sat near the door in a folding chair and said nothing. Prescott read the estate total, 28 million. Brandon toasted. Then Prescott turned the page. "To my ex-husband, Thomas Blackwood, I leave nothing." Brandon slammed the table in triumph. Then Prescott kept reading. "However, all assets shall be immediately transferred into the Catherine Blackwood Protective Trust." Brandon relaxed until he learned he had no direct access. The trust was discretionary, controlled entirely by a trustee. "Who's the trustee?" he demanded. Prescott pointed to the back of the room. "The sole trustee with absolute and final authority over every penny is Thomas Blackwood." The silence was absolute. I stood, buttoned my jacket properly, and walked to the head of the table. I put on my real reading glasses and opened the liabilities tab. Brandon, 2 million to a Vegas casino, 800,000 to a Chicago lending group known for breaking kneecaps. Tiffany, 5 maxed cards and a forged second mortgage on your parents' house. That's a felony, dear. Brandon lunged at me. 2 security guards I'd hired that morning stopped him cold. "You brought security to a will reading?" he gasped. "I learned from the best," I said. "You evicted me at a funeral." I told them I'd accept their eviction terms, and then informed them I was changing the locks on the mansion they'd been squatting in for 6 months. Rent on my old apartment, now theirs, $2,000 a month, payable to the trust. For 3 days I watched from a hotel room as Brandon unraveled. Tiffany went live, crying that his father had stolen their inheritance and was abusing his power. Donations poured in from strangers. Then the real attack came. Brandon filed to have me declared mentally incompetent, backed by a bought doctor's affidavit claiming years of treating my dementia. I'd never met the man. I couldn't fight that fast through the courts, so I went to the mansion myself. Inside, Brandon and Tiffany were running an illegal estate sale, selling Catherine's antiques to strangers for cash. I called the police. Officers escorted them off the property as buyers fled. Alone in the house, I opened Catherine's desk, the one with the false bottom I'd built myself, and found a letter. "Don't give him the money. Not until he's broken. Break him, Tom, so we can build him back up." That night, a blocked number called. Men from the Chicago lending group, demanding $1 million, threatening accidents if I didn't pay. I didn't call the police. I called Prescott. I was going to buy the debt myself, in cash, from my own savings. If I owned the note, Brandon wouldn't owe the mob anymore. He'd owe me. Meanwhile, Tiffany went nuclear online, forging a threatening letter from me and broadcasting it to 30,000 viewers, calling me abusive, a narcissist, a predator. Reporters found my hotel. I stayed calm, ate my sandwich, and told Prescott to prepare the nuclear option, Clause B of the trust. I sent Brandon an email granting him and Tiffany immediate occupancy of the mansion. They didn't read the fine print. They moved in triumphantly, popped champagne, and by midnight were freezing, because I'd fired the maintenance man and the ancient boiler had died. Clause B made the beneficiary responsible for all upkeep. The pipes ran rust. The Historical Society blocked easy repairs. Then the property tax bill arrived, $85,000, due in 30 days, because occupancy voided Catherine's business exemption. They were trapped in a museum they couldn't afford to live in, with mob enforcers circling the gate. Desperate, Brandon tried borrowing $50,000 from a 4th Street loan shark, pledging the mansion's contents as collateral. Fraud, since none of it was his to pledge. I secretly bought that debt too, along with the Chicago note, through a shell company called Ironwood Financial. By that evening, I owned every dollar my son owed. While they celebrated their win with a lobster and champagne binge, I sent an anonymous text. $15,000 due in 48 hours, or assets would be seized. Their celebration collapsed into panic. Cornered, they turned criminal. I overheard, through access I'd quietly kept, Brandon and Tiffany plotting with the bought doctor to have me forcibly committed on a fabricated psychiatric file, so they could seize guardianship of the trust. That night, police, paramedics, and the doctor showed up at my hotel room. Brandon sobbed crocodile tears, while Tiffany screamed that I had a gun and was hearing voices. I let them strap me to a gurney and load me into the ambulance, because the paramedic was mine. 2 blocks later, the siren cut off. My man Davis pulled off his mask, unlocked the restraints, and showed me the camera that had recorded everything. The fake diagnosis, Tiffany's lies, Brandon whispering, "You won't remember any of this." We drove to a safe house where Prescott and a notary were waiting to process the evidence, while the driver's cousin delivered the drug doctor straight to a police precinct with his fraud laid bare. Believing I was sedated and gone, Brandon got reckless. He scheduled an illegal midnight estate auction at the mansion. Masquerade-themed, cash only, no questions asked. I attended in a silk mask as an anonymous bidder. Ming vases, a Persian rug, and finally the centerpiece, Catherine's prized painting, The Solitude, legally designated for donation to the National Gallery, a protected cultural asset. Brandon, sweating with greed, opened bidding at $500,000. I raised my hand. $1 million. Silence. The gavel came down. Sold. I climbed the stage to settle the payment. When I pulled off my mask, Brandon's face went white. "Dr. Eris is in federal custody," I told him, my voice carrying over the microphone. "And in 30 seconds, you'll be joining him." As the guests scrambled to abandon their stolen purchases, the windows shattered. FBI agents flooded in. Brandon was tackled and zip-tied on the floor he'd grown up playing on. Tiffany was cuffed, trying to slip out a side door, diamonds still sparkling under the tactical lights. "You planned this," Brandon screamed as they dragged him out. "I didn't set you up, son," I said quietly. "I just let you be yourself." I thought it was over. It wasn't. Out on bail days later, Tiffany called me secretly, begging to meet. At a roadside diner, stripped of her jewelry and her performance, she offered to hand me evidence against Brandon, offshore accounts, hidden cash, in exchange for $50,000 and a good word with the prosecutor. I recorded every word, then walked out without paying her a cent. I sent the recording straight to Brandon. "She values you at $50,000. Their alliance shattered instantly, exactly what I needed before trial, so they'd turn on each other under oath instead of standing united. But I'd forgotten how dangerous a cornered man becomes. That night, Brandon found Tiffany at the motel and beat her nearly to death, a fractured jaw, broken ribs. Police issued an armed and dangerous alert. Prescott, pale, told me Brandon had vanished. I told him Brandon wasn't running. He had no money, no passport, no friends left. He believed I was the source of every wound in his life, and a man with nothing left to lose doesn't flee. He comes to finish it. He was coming for me. I checked the deadbolt on my hotel door. I pushed a chair against it. I'd built bridges that held up millions of tons of steel by knowing exactly where the pressure would find its crack. I'd spent weeks engineering my son's collapse point by point. The debt, the cold house, the tax bill, the broken alliance, and now the final beam was about to give way, right at my door. I wasn't afraid. I'd known this story's ending since the day I read Catherine's letter. Break him so we can build him back up. We'd broken him completely. Whatever walked through that door next wasn't going to be the son I raised. It was going to be the last piece of wreckage from a life built entirely on someone else's money. And I intended to make sure it was the piece that finally hit rock bottom, and stayed there long enough to actually learn something. If Brandon Blackwood wanted a final confrontation with the father he'd tried to bury in a psychiatric ward and a stolen inheritance, he was going to get one, on my terms, in front of the police I'd already called the moment Prescott told me he was missing. The bridge was built, the pressure was set, and this time, there'd be nothing left for him to burn down but himself.